Silent suspicions. Eleanor Walker stood at the kitchen window, absently stirring her tea as she watched the gardener trim the hedges that bordered their expansive property. The morning sun caught on her wedding ring, sending prisms of light dancing across the marble countertop. 15 years of marriage to Julian had afforded her this life of luxury at a sprawling Tudor-style home in the most exclusive neighborhood of Oak Ridge, the vacation property in the Hamptons, the art collection that made visitors gasp. Yet lately, something felt off. Like a painting hanging slightly crooked that no one else seemed to notice. "I'm heading out." "Darling," Julian announced, his voice echoing through the kitchen as he adjusted his tie Hermes. A birthday gift she'd chosen carefully last month. Board meeting, then dinner with the Phillips Group. "Don't wait up." Eleanor nodded, offering a practiced smile. "Good luck with the acquisition talks." She rose on tiptoes to kiss his cheek, catching the unfamiliar scent of a perfume that wasn't hers. Not overpowering, just ... present. Like a whisper she wasn't meant to hear. Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, angled slightly away from her, then quickly pocketed it. Thomas still asleep? It's Saturday, and he's 16. I'll be lucky if he emerges before noon. Julian chuckled, but it felt hollow. Right, well, I'm off then. The front door closed with a soft click, followed by the purr of his Aston Martin pulling away. Eleanor waited until the sound faded before setting her teacup down with a clatter. Her hands suddenly unsteady, she made her way to her private study, the one room in the house that was entirely hers. Bookshelves lined the walls, interspersed with photographs from happier times, their honeymoon in Bali, Thomas's first steps, family Christmases. She unlocked the bottom drawer of her antique writing desk and pulled out a leather-bound journal, a gift from her grandmother that she'd never found a use for. Until now, Eleanor opened to the first blank page, uncapped her fountain pen, and began to write. April 12th, Julian came home late again. Third time this week. Said he was with Richard discussing the Phillips merger. But Richard's wife mentioned at yoga that Richard was in Chicago until Thursday. When I mentioned this casually over breakfast, Julian spilled his coffee and changed the subject. His phone keeps buzzing at odd hours. He takes calls in the other room now. She paused, staring at the words. Seeing her suspicions written down made them more real, more frightening. But also strangely cathartic. Perhaps I'm being paranoid. 15 years is a long time. People change, grow apart sometimes. But I can't shake this feeling of distance between us. His eyes don't linger on mine the way they used to. His kisses feel perfunctory. When did that happen? When did we start going through the motions? Eleanor continued writing, documenting small moments, inconsistencies in Julian's stories, changes in his habits. By the time she finished, 3 pages were filled with her elegant script, a chronicle of doubt taking shape. She closed the journal, locked it away, and wiped away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. That evening, she attended the Oak Ridge Children's Hospital benefit alone. Explaining that Julian was closing an important business deal, she moved through the ballroom with practiced grace, accepting compliments on her emerald gown, bidding generously during the auction, laughing at all the right moments. Eleanor, you look stunning as always, Beatrice Harrington. The chairwoman of the hospital board gushed. But where's that handsome husband of yours? You two are such a picture-perfect couple. Eleanor's smile never faltered. Work, emergency. You know Julian always, the dedicated businessman? Later that night, as she removed her jewelry and prepared for bed, Eleanor heard Julian's key in the door. It was just past midnight. She quickly turned off her bedside lamp and closed her eyes, feigning sleep as he entered their bedroom and quietly undressed in the dark. The mattress dipped as he slid in beside her, careful not to wake her. He didn't reach for her, didn't pull her close, as he once would have. Instead, he kept to his side, a few inches of cold sheet between them that somehow felt like miles. Eleanor lay awake long after. Julian's breathing had deepened into sleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering when the man she married had become a stranger and what secrets he was keeping from her on the other side of that growing divide. Asterisk, ink, and intuition. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains as Eleanor added another entry to her journal. 3 weeks had passed since she'd begun documenting her suspicions, and the pages were filling quickly with observations and questions. May 3rd, Julian canceled our anniversary dinner. Said there was an emergency with the Shanghai contract. Called the office, his assistant seemed confused. Said he'd left early. When he came home at midnight, his explanation was vague. Shirt collar had a smudge of lipstick. Too red to be mine. Eleanor closed the journal with a sigh. Outside, spring was in full bloom, the garden bursting with color. But inside the Walker mansion, cold shadows seemed to have fallen. She tucked the journal into her desk drawer, locked it, and slipped the key into the pocket of her silk robe. "Mom, are you up?" Thomas's voice called from the hallway. "In my study, sweetheart," she replied, quickly wiping her eyes. Thomas appeared in the doorway, his lanky teenage frame filling the space. With Julian's strong jaw and her own thoughtful brown eyes, he'd grown into a handsome young man, perceptive too, perhaps more than she realized. "You okay?" he asked, studying her face. "Your eyes look red." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Spring allergies. Nothing to worry about." She smiled, changing the subject. "I thought you'd be sleeping until noon." "It's not even 9. Basketball practice. Coach Donovan scheduled an extra session before next week's championship." He hesitated. "Have you heard from Dad?" "He promised to come to the game." "I'm sure he'll be there," Eleanor said, hoping it wasn't another empty promise. Julian had missed the last 3. Thomas nodded, unconvinced. "Right. Well, I'll be back around 1. He turned to leave, then paused. "Hey, do you have that permission slip for the college tour?" "I need to turn it in Monday. Should be in my desk organizer. Top right drawer." "Help yourself, I need to shower before my meeting with the museum board." Eleanor headed to her bathroom, leaving Thomas alone in the study. He opened the right drawer, shuffling through papers until he found the form. As he pulled it out, he accidentally knocked over a small crystal paperweight, which rolled to the edge of the desk and fell, landing with a thud on the hardwood floor. Thomas knelt to retrieve it, noticing it had fallen near the bottom left drawer, slightly ajar now, the impact having jostled the imperfect lock. Something leather-bound peeked out. Curiosity got the better of him. He glanced toward the bathroom door, heard the shower running, and carefully opened the drawer further. His mother's journal lay inside. He recognized her handwriting, immediately elegant and precise, like everything else about Eleanor Walker. Thomas knew he shouldn't read it. This was private, personal, and yet something about his mother's red-rimmed eyes and forced smile compelled him to pick it up. He opened to a random page in the middle. April 20th. "Julian's been working late with Vanessa again. 4th time this month. When I mentioned her at breakfast, I noticed him flinch slightly. He's been mentioning her more often in conversation, almost deliberately, as if to normalize her presence in his life. I looked her up online today. Beautiful, brilliant, unmarried. 10 years younger than me? I hate the jealousy I feel, but I can't help wondering if there's more than business between them." Thomas felt his chest tighten. Vanessa Reeves, his father's business partner in their newest hotel development. He'd met her once at a company party, remembered his father's hand lingering on her lower back as he introduced them. At the time, it hadn't registered as anything unusual. Asterisk, he flipped to the most recent entry. Dated just that morning, the receipts in his jacket pocket don't match his stories. Dinner at Maze in Blue when he said he was at the office. A hotel parking validation when he claimed to be at a client meeting across town. Am I going crazy? Or is the truth exactly what I fear it is? Sometimes I catch him looking at me with something like guilt in his eyes, and I almost wish he would just confess. End this terrible uncertainty. Thomas closed the journal, carefully returning it to the drawer. His hands trembled slightly as he pushed it closed, the lock clicking into place. The shower was still running. He pocketed the permission slip and left the study, his mind reeling with what he'd discovered. Asterisk, over the next week, Thomas found himself watching his father more carefully. The way Julian checked his phone constantly at dinner, the secretive phone calls he took in his home office, door firmly closed, the late nights and vague explanations. Each day after school, while his mother was at her various charity commitments, Thomas would borrow her desk key from where she kept it hidden in a small ceramic box on her bookshelf. He would read the new entries, each one revealing more of his mother's pain and suspicion. May 10th. Julian said he's going to Chicago for a conference this weekend. Called the hotel where the conference is being held. They have no record of a financial services event, nor a reservation under his name. Thomas began his own investigation. He checked his father's credit card statements, left open on his laptop one evening. There were charges from restaurants his father had never mentioned, a jewelry store where they'd never shopped, a weekend booking at a remote cabin resort when Julian had claimed to be at a business retreat, and then there was Vanessa. Thomas saw how his father's expression changed when her name came up, a softening around the eyes that he never showed with Eleanor anymore. He noticed the text notifications that Julian quickly dismissed when they appeared. On his phone screen during family dinner, one afternoon, Thomas drove by his father's office building after basketball practice just as everyone was leaving for the day. He parked across the street, watching. His father emerged with Vanessa at his side, their heads bent close together. Julian's hand rested possessively on her waist as he opened the passenger door of his car for her, a gesture of intimacy that Thomas hadn't seen him show his mother in years. That night, Thomas lay awake, staring at his ceiling. Torn between loyalty to his mother and fear of destroying what remained of their family, Eleanor's journal had become both a revelation and a burden of truth he wasn't meant to know, but couldn't now unknow. The perfect family image they projected to the world was crumbling, and Thomas found himself at the center of the collapse, holding pieces of a broken truth that cut deep into his understanding of his parents. Tomorrow, he decided he would read the journal one more time. Then he would decide what to do with the knowledge that was burning a hole in his teenage heart. Asterisk, written in heartache. The house was quiet when Thomas returned from school the next day. Eleanor had texted that she would be late. The museum fundraiser planning had run into complications. Julian was in New York, supposedly negotiating with investors. Thomas knew exactly how to spend this unexpected privacy. He made his way to his mother's study, retrieving the ceramic box where she kept the small brass key. The journal was where it always was, nestled in the bottom drawer. Thomas settled into the leather armchair by the window, the afternoon sun warming his shoulders as he began to read. The most recent entry was from that morning, May 15th, found a receipt for 2 tickets to the symphony this Saturday in Julian's blazer. He told me he'd be in Phoenix for meetings. I almost called him out on it, but something stopped me. Fear, maybe, of confirmation, of confrontation, of collapse. What happens to us if I say the words aloud? What happens to Thomas? I keep thinking about when we met. Julian was so attentive, so present. When did his eyes start looking through me instead of at me? When did I become an obligation rather than a joy? Vanessa called the house yesterday, asking for him. Her voice changed when I answered. She said she needed his input on contract revisions. At 9 p.m., perhaps there's an innocent explanation for everything. Perhaps I'm manufacturing a tragedy where there's merely distance. But my heart knows better. Thomas felt a heaviness in his chest. His mother's pain, laid bare in her elegant handwriting, made him angry at his father. He flipped back through earlier pages, noticing patterns emerging, a detailed catalog of Julian's absences, inconsistencies, and lies. His mother had been methodical, noting dates, times, excuses given versus facts discovered. What had begun as scattered suspicions had evolved into compelling evidence. One entry from late April caught his attention. He left his laptop open today. Against my better judgment, I looked. Email from Vanessa. Last night was perfect. I've booked the same room for next week. I closed it immediately, feeling sick. There it was, confirmation of what I've suspected. So why haven't I confronted him? What am I waiting for? Perhaps it's pride. The great Eleanor Walker, humiliated, betrayed. What will our friends say? Our families? Or perhaps it's Thomas. How will this affect him? Julian may be failing as a husband, but he loves his son. Do I have the right to detonate that relationship? Thomas closed his eyes, memories flooding back. His father teaching him to ride a bike, cheering at his first basketball game, their annual fishing trips to Lake Champlain, The man in those memories didn't align with the man in his mother's journal, a liar, a cheater, someone causing deliberate pain. He continued reading, moving through April and into May, watching his mother's emotions evolve from confusion to suspicion to certainty to grief. The most recent entries showed something new emerge in: a quiet anger, steely resolve. May 12th, I've decided to stop crying. 15 years of my life devoted to this marriage, to creating the perfect home, the perfect life for us. I deserve better than lies. Thomas deserves better than a household built on deception. I need to confront Julian, but strategically. Not from a place of weakness or hysteria, but with dignity and evidence. I won't be gaslit or dismissed. Thomas was startled by a notification on his phone, a text from his father. Heading home tomorrow instead of Sunday. Don't tell your mom, want to surprise her. Maybe the three of us can have dinner at Riverside Grill? A surge of anger rose in Thomas's chest. The casual deception, telling Eleanor he'd be gone through Sunday, while telling Thomas he'd be back tomorrow. The audacity of suggesting a family dinner after spending nights with another woman. The way Julian was using Thomas as an unwitting accomplice in his web of lies. He almost texted back something confrontational, but stopped himself. Knowledge was power, and right now, he had knowledge his father didn't realize he possessed. Thomas carefully returned the journal to its place, locked the drawer, and replaced the key. He wandered to the kitchen, absent-mindedly making a sandwich as his mind raced. What should he do? Tell his mother about the text, exposing another of Julian's lies? Confront his father directly? Stay silent and let things play out. Later that evening, Eleanor returned, looking tired but composed. She smiled when she saw Thomas at the kitchen table with his calculus homework. "How was your day?" she asked, setting down her portfolio and kicking off her heels. "Fine," Thomas replied, studying her face. Was that resignation in her eyes? Or determination? How was the museum meeting? Productive. We've finalized the gala details. She opened the refrigerator, surveying its contents. "I'm thinking pasta for dinner." "Just us tonight, Mom," Thomas began, then hesitated. "Are you happy?" Eleanor froze, her back to him, hand still on the refrigerator door. When she turned, her expression was carefully neutral. "What brings that question on?" "Just wondering." He traced patterns on his textbook with his finger. "You and Dad. You seem different lately." She closed the refrigerator and came to sit across from him. "Marriage is complicated, Thomas. People go through phases, drift apart sometimes, find their way back. And if they don't find their way back," he pressed. Eleanor reached across the table, taking his hand. "Then they make difficult decisions. But I want you to know something. Whatever happens between your father and me, it has nothing to do with you. We both love you unconditionally." Thomas nodded, wondering if this was his opening to confess he'd read her journal, to tell her about his father's text. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he squeezed her hand. "I love you too, Mom." She smiled, a real smile this time, and the moment passed. That night, Thomas lay awake again, staring at his ceiling. Tomorrow, his father would return home, expecting his surprise to delight Eleanor. Tomorrow. The careful documentation in his mother's journal would collide with reality in ways Thomas couldn't predict. He thought of the journal entries, of his mother's journey from confusion to clarity. He thought of his father's deceptions, small and large. He thought of Vanessa Reeves, who had inserted herself into their lives without regard for the damage she was helping to cause. By the time dawn broke, Thomas had made his decision. He wouldn't be a passive observer in his family's unraveling. He would act carefully, thoughtfully, but decisively. The truth his mother had written in heartache would finally see the light of day. And Thomas would make sure that light illuminated a path forward, whatever that might look like. As he finally drifted to sleep in the early morning hours, Thomas felt a strange sense of peace. The perfect family facade was about to crumble, but maybe something more authentic could rise from the ruins. Confrontation by candlelight. Thomas waited until evening, when his father had returned and his mother had prepared a family dinner, candles lit. Fine china set out as though nothing was wrong. The facade was almost painful to witness. Before we eat, Thomas said. His heart hammering, I have something to say. His parents exchanged glances. Mom, I know about your journal. Thomas turned to his mother, whose face paled instantly. I've been reading it for weeks. Eleanor set down her water glass with a shaking hand. Thomas, that was private. And Dad, Thomas continued. Turning to Julian, who looked confused, Mom knows about Vanessa. About the lies. All of it. Julian's expression shifted from confusion to shock to defensive anger. What exactly are you implying, son? No more pretending, Thomas said firmly. Mom has documented everything, the contradictions, the receipts, the late nights, the hotel rooms. Eleanor looked at her son with wide eyes. Thomas, this isn't how I wanted, I know, he interrupted gently. But we can't keep living like this. The secrets are destroying us. Julian's face hardened. This is between your mother and me. No, Thomas replied. It affects all of us. And I refuse to be part of the lie anymore. Eleanor reached for the wine glass, then stopped herself. He's right, Julian. It's time for truth. What followed was 3 hours of painful conversation. Julian initially denied everything, then deflected. Then finally, when presented with the meticulous timeline Eleanor had created, broke down. I never meant for it to happen, he whispered, tears in his eyes. It just ... did. Things don't just happen, Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite her tears. You made choices, repeatedly. Thomas watched his parents, the man who had taught him about integrity now unable to meet his eyes. The woman who had shown him kindness, now displaying unexpected strength. What happens now? Thomas finally asked. Eleanor looked at Julian. That depends on what your father wants, and what he's willing to do to earn back trust. Julian looked up. I want our family. I've been a fool, but I want to fix this. Then Vanessa's gone. Completely, Eleanor said. And we start therapy, together and separately. No more secrets. As the candles burned low, a fragile new understanding began to form between them. Asterisk rewriting their story 6 months past, bringing change to the Walker family. Julian had severed ties with Vanessa, transferring her to their European division. He'd moved into the guest house, temporarily close enough to remain part of daily life, distant enough to give Eleanor space. The journal that had exposed their broken marriage now chronicled its rebuilding. Eleanor wrote of small moments of reconnection, of painful therapy sessions, of Julian's efforts to earn forgiveness. November 18th, Julian brought coffee this morning. We sat on the porch watching the sunrise, talking about Thomas's college applications. It felt ... normal, not forced. For a moment, I remembered why I fell in love with him. Thomas found himself in an unexpected role, part mediator, part witness, part cheerleader for his parents' efforts. He'd seen both at their worst and was now watching them try to find their best selves again. I'm proud of you, he told his mother one evening as they prepared dinner together. Julian would be joining them, a ritual they'd established, family dinners 3 nights a week. For what? She asked, not giving up, but also not settling. Thomas chopped vegetables beside her. You could have pretended nothing happened, or just walked away. Eleanor smiled. The hardest path is sometimes the right one. When Julian arrived, he brought dessert from Eleanor's favorite bakery. The three sat at the kitchen table, not in the formal dining room, laughing over Thomas's story about his basketball coach. Later, Thomas retreated to his room, leaving his parents to talk. From his window, he could see them walking in the garden. Julian's hand cautiously reaching for Eleanor's. She hesitated, then accepted it. The Walker family would never be the same. The perfect image they'd projected to the world had shattered, but in its place, something real was slowly taking shape, a family built on hard-earned honesty rather than comfortable lies. In Eleanor's final journal entry, which Thomas would read years later when she gave him the journal as a gift before his wedding day, she'd written, "The truth hurts, but secrets destroy. Our family survived because we finally had the courage to face reality together. Love isn't perfect, it's a choice you make every day, especially on days when it's difficult. Julian and I are writing a new story now, with our eyes wide open, and Thomas, who forced us to confront the truth, gave us the greatest gift of all, the chance to build something authentic from the ruins of what we'd lost. The journal that had once documented heartache now stood as testament to a family's resilience. Proof that, even shattered relationships, could find new form if those involved were brave enough to pick up the pieces and begin again, one honest moment at a time.